Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're pulling back the curtain on the blueprint of colonialism, and you're going to see how designs from hundreds of years ago are still running the show in our world today.
So, here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the basic business model, the why of empire. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the colonial playbook, the actual strategies. We're going to see how they literally re-engineered societies, why the whole system eventually came crashing down, and, maybe most importantly, how its ghost is still rattling around inside modern nations.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The first thing you've got to get is that colonialism wasn't just, planting flags and random invasions. Nope, it was a system. A business model designed with one goal in mind, to suck wealth from the colonies, the periphery, and shoot it straight back to the imperial core.
And look, the sources are crystal clear on this. The number one goal was to get rich. Economic extraction wasn't some unfortunate side effect, it was the entire point. And this quote really hits it home. The consequences didn't just vanish. They're still here, baked into the inequalities we see every single day.
This brings us to a really powerful idea from social science: path dependency. Think about it like this. You lay down a railroad track. Once that track is there, the train can pretty much only go where the track leads, right? Well, colonialism laid down these massive, continent-spanning tracks, and a lot of nations today, they're still chugging along on those same paths set for them generations ago.
Now, this wasn't a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. The whole strategy, the entire blueprint, it all depended on what they found when they showed up. What were the starting conditions? If they walked into a place with a huge population, great, instant labor force. If they found a big, organized kingdom already running things, perfect, just co-opt the leaders and rule through them. But what if they found just scattered tribes, no central power? Well, then they just impose their own system from the top down. That first look was everything.
So how did they pull this off? Well, it basically came down to a playbook with 3 huge, game-changing decisions, and each one came with some serious trade-offs that would shape the destiny of the colony for centuries.
All right, decision number 1, the army. Who's going to enforce your will? Option A, use your own soldiers. They're loyal, sure, but man, are they expensive. They get sick from local diseases, and nobody back home likes seeing their kids sent off to die in a foreign land. So what about option B? Recruit locals. They're cheap, they know the terrain, but here's the catch, and it's a big one. You're training and arming the exact people who could, and often did, turn those guns right back on you. Just ask the British about the Indian Rebellion of 1857.
Okay, decision number 2, the economy. What are you actually there to take? If it's something like diamonds or gold, you build what's called an enclave economy. Basically a fortified little bubble that just pipes resources straight out. But if you're after cash crops, think cotton, coffee, stuff like that, you need to control vast stretches of land and the people on it. And believe me, those 2 economic paths lead to completely different kinds of societies down the road.
In this chart, this just lays it all out. What you're looking at is something called the Thiel Index. It's just a fancy way to measure inequality. And if you look at the lines for places like Kenya or Uganda, you see it plain as day. The more their cash crop exports boomed, the more income inequalities surged right along with it. All that new wealth, it went straight into the pockets of a tiny, tiny elite.
And that brings us to the third big decision, governance. Who's actually running the place day to day? You could go with direct rule. Send your own people, your own bureaucrats to run the whole show. Or you could take the cheaper, easier route, indirect rule. Just find the local power players, the chiefs, the elites, and let them rule for you. You just prop them up, and in return, they do your bidding.
And this map of India, it's the perfect picture of that choice in action. See the pink areas? That's British India, run directly by the British. The yellow parts? Those were the native states, where they used local rulers as puppets. The whole country was turned into this giant political experiment, a patchwork of these 2 completely different systems running side by side.
So what happened in the long run? Well, a really fascinating study looked at these areas decades after independence, and the results were stunning. The parts that had been under direct British rule, they consistently had worse public services. We're talking fewer schools, fewer health centers, fewer roads. The basic building blocks of a modern state were just weaker.
So, case closed, right? Indirect rule is better for development. Direct rule is worse. Well, not so fast. Because what's wild is that when you look at other parts of the world, you find the exact opposite.
Okay, so check out this scatter plot from a study on Africa. It tells a totally different story. For societies that were already very decentralized before the colonizers got there, that's the stuff on the left, having more direct administration actually led to better economic growth after independence. So what does that tell us? It means there was no magic formula. The best strategy for the colonizer and the long-term impact depended entirely on the society they were trying to control in the first place.
But it wasn't just about armies and money. The playbook had another, much darker chapter: social engineering. A strategy designed to break societies apart from the inside.
You've heard of it, divide and conquer. The logic is brutally simple. If you can get people fighting each other, they can't unite to fight you. So colonial powers became masters at finding the little cracks in a society, ethnic differences, religious tensions, and prying them open until they became giant canyons.
And the tactics they used were just devastating. This was a systematic attack on culture itself. They'd suppress native languages, throw out traditional laws, and put in their own. And, in some of the most tragic cases, force children into residential schools with the explicit goal of wiping out their heritage. You tear down the pillars of a society, and what's left is just rubble.
And how did they justify this? Well, it was all wrapped up in this really ugly ideology. Take a look at this quote from a Brazilian official talking about Japanese immigrants, calling them insoluble, like sulfur. It's that kind of dehumanizing language that gives you the excuse you need to create these divisions and justify discrimination. So, if this whole system was this well-oiled machine built for control, why did it fall apart? You might think the answer is just, popular uprisings. But it's actually a bit more complicated than that. Look, popular resistance was always there, always pushing. But the final knockout blow usually came from a 1-2 punch. First, you get elite betrayal. The same local big shots the colonizers propped up, they'd turn on a dime and lead the independence movement as soon as the empire's rules started cutting into their own profits. And second, empires just go broke. It's called imperial overstretch. Eventually, the cost of policing a huge, angry territory is just way more than you're making from it. The whole business model just goes bankrupt. And that brings us to the final and maybe most important part. Because even when the flags come down and the colonists go home, the blueprint, it doesn't just disappear, it stays behind. It's the ghost in the machine. So now, let's connect all these pieces. This table really lays it out. You can almost see the formulas. You take mineral extraction, you add direct rule, and what do you get? Often a fragile state plagued by conflict over those resources. We call it the resource curse. Okay, what about the other formula? You take cash crops, add indirect rule through local elites, and the result? A society that might be stable, but is wildly unequal, with the same powerful families staying in charge forever.
So, here's the bottom line. When you read the news today about conflict in one country or deep-seated inequality in another, it's not random. It's not just how things are. So much of it is the predictable echo of those blueprints we've been talking about, drawn up centuries ago. That path, the one they laid down, many countries are still on it.
Look, understanding this blueprint is a huge first step. It helps make sense of the world, to see the hidden logic behind so many global problems. But it leaves us with one last really tough question. We can see the ghost in the machine now. We know it's there. The question is, how do you exorcise a ghost?